Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. I want to welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I am pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. For today's broadcast, we want to revisit the coronavirus pandemic. You know, it introduced itself to the world in 2019. We are now at the end of 2022. And no better time for an update on what the state of affairs is vis-a-vis this pandemic and the global community. We're going to start, of course, with the United States. And we have an expert guest that's been on the platform before, Louisiana-based physician and medical scientist, Dr. Velva Bowles. Without any further ado, we want to welcome her to today's broadcast. Greetings of peace, Dr. Bowles, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. As always, I am so honored to be asked to be on this show.
Let's begin with the United States. Again, you know, this pandemic introduced itself in 2019. It's been about 3 years that we've been wrestling with this monster now, and there's a debate, an ongoing debate. It has never ended as to how severe the situation is. Is it severe at all? Is it a hoax? Is it real? And for those who acknowledge that it is, in fact, a real threat to public health, the question is, where are we now? Where are we now in the United States with this pandemic, Dr. Bowles?
Well, in the United States, I'll start with the question and I'll walk it back. In 2022, those who intended to profit are very profitable. There are billions of dollars which have been garnered by Pfizer, Moderna, and I'm sure Johnson & Johnson. How did America handle this pandemic? It was a political football. Unfortunately, doctors outside of those handpicked, such as Dr. Fauci, were not allowed to speak. The media, general media, did not cover any of the very knowledgeable doctors on the front line at various hospitals who were confronting the disease head on with patients. Instead, doctors were given a script. And the script said, and this is December 2019 through probably 2021. I'll say probably because I don't know how long people were punished for trying to practice real medicine, but I do know they were. I'll speak to New Orleans, Louisiana, because that's where I trained at Tulane. And a number of people who remembered me when I had an active clinic and practice in the area were calling me. Their calls were saying, Dr. Bowles, what should I do? I take my mother to the ER and they turn her away. They say if she doesn't have a fever, if she doesn't have a cough, if she doesn't have loss of taste, they are not calling it COVID-19 and she must go home, and they give her an emetic, which is the opposite of what you want to do. Emetic is to stop you from vomiting. And if they gave her an anti-diarrhea medicine, again, the opposite of what you want to do when it is an infectious cause of such symptoms. One particular person took their mother to the ER 5 times. When they finally admitted her, the mother died within 9 days. If you remember, or if you were following what was released as news, everyone was saying this was a respiratory disease. There was a huge call for ventilators. What wasn't said, and slowly you can get some of the statistical data, is that Black Americans were dying disproportionately because the COVID-19 virus did not attack the lungs first. It is not only a respiratory disease. In people of color and some non-color, but mainly in Black people in America, this disease attacked the gut. What listeners may not know, one of your major immune system is in the bowel. It's called the Brunner glands. It surrounds the small intestine. So if you have any digestive issues, if you have ulcers, if you are diabetic, if you are morbidly obese, if your health from what you eat is not very strong, those immune glands are the ones that are most often operative first before you start doing the T cells and antibodies. But when you are not in optimal condition, for whatever the reason, that frontline defense is not there. And what we were seeing in the Black population is that the COVID or the coronavirus of December 2019 targeted their GI system or gastrointestinal system. They had diarrhea, they felt nauseous, they had fatigue, they had extreme dehydration. But here's the shocker. Because this was scripted, their symptoms didn't matter. The symptoms that matter had been predetermined. And I actually challenged this thinking on some international Zoom meetings. And their comment was, well, those are the symptoms, the fever, loss of taste. That's what the Chinese people had. And when the Italians started to die, that's what symptoms they had. So consequently, when I say political football in America, without allowing the doctors to do what they're taught to do. I mean, I was an avid historian for medicine. I wrote for the medical school newspaper in the University of Pittsburgh. And I, like Dr. Osler and other outstanding physicians who made a comment that you treat the patient, not the disease. And that just sticks in my mind, and it has throughout my career. 5 people can have diabetes type 2, and all of them have different complications or symptoms. So what happened in America? They treated a disease, and the people really were second. Not only were they treating a disease, but they were doing it experimentally. Yes, I said it, that the inoculum that they were pushing as a vaccine does not fit the definition of vaccine as it has been for the last 150 years. What was given in Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson was an inoculum, and you'll hear me use that term. Using messenger RNA to direct a person's body to generate a foreign protein is not the definition of vaccine. Just for those who may not know, a vaccine generally is using the offending agent. We compromise it. We either, if it's bacteria, we kill it. If it's a virus, we call it inactivated. But what it is, we introduce the very thing your body needs to recognize. And however your body wants to recognize it, whether it's by the surface protein or some internal protein or whatever it is it recognizes, we allow the body to decide. Mother Nature decides. If it's a B cell response, a T cell response, or whatever else, it is what the body decides. How is what we got different? In the United States, they gave it a messenger RNA. The messenger RNA then had to be transcribed into a protein. And this protein is a foreign protein. It's not what the body usually makes. When this protein's generated, then the body is supposed to see it and say, this isn't part of what we generally make. We need to fight. So it's a multi-process of educating the body to recognize the enemy. So that was the first thing that makes it experimental. Never has it been done in the history of mankind. And you would say, well, Dr. Bowles, why did they even have this technology? The technology is experimental and helpful when you're looking at cancer patients. There is a form of medicine called precision medicine. And I'm delighted when I talk to the young scholars who are working in that area and perfecting it. This is introducing such things as genetic material, targeting such things as cancerous cells or cells out of control. And by this method, getting the body or the person who has no other alternative, who have been diagnosed, have had contemporary treatments, and still are fighting for their life, then introduce such novel or experimental techniques. And some have positive outcome. But to sell this to 360 million people as the only method by which they could live from the assault of COVID-19 was false. I said it. There were and is alternative ways to protect people from infections of new diseases, virus mutations that were not even offered except to the president at the time, Donald Trump, when he became ill, being over 70 years old. One of his frontline treatments were immunoglobulins. Well, guess what? Immunoglobulins available to anybody. We've used immunoglobulin for over 110 years. When I visited Africa back in the 80s, working with some projects, I actually have received immunoglobulins because my body did not know or was not educated. We use the term was naive to some of the infections that were prevalent in the areas that I traveled. So they protected me. So the senior citizens that died in 2020, 2021, the Christmases missed, the birthdays missed, the isolation from family did not have to happen to the extent that it did. If the elderly who may not have sufficient immune capacity to do the multi-step protection that these inoculums suggested or required, they could have been given immunoglobulins. And that is a protection. It's not long-term, but it can get you past a bad place. Many times we're talking 6 weeks to 3 months protection, but I mean absolute protection. Anytime you take even the conventional vaccine, it takes 6 weeks, sometimes 10 days to 6 weeks for your body to respond. And it is highly based on your baseline. Are you healthy enough to respond? One of my irritations now is they have on television commercials of very somber music, and then they'll show different people. And they said, if you follow the directions and you did all you could do, and you still could not muster an immune response, we have immunoglobulins for you. And then they go on to list what companies you can get your protection from. And I just want to, sometimes what I do is I turn the television off, but I'm very, very enraged to the point of wanting to throw something at the TV set. Why are you offering it 3 years later, after 100 million people worldwide have died? Why wasn't that choice given up front? Why weren't people told, if you have a loved one in the nursing home and they are very susceptible emotionally to being isolated or abandoned, if you would like, we could administer this? That's not just compassionate, it's good medicine. And secondarily, if you have significant amount of people coming to you with a symptom, you don't dismiss them and send them home. That's when we call CDC and the state epidemiologists, is we have a pattern here that we haven't seen before. That wasn't what was done in December 2019 through March of 2020. If you did not have the symptoms of the Chinese or the symptoms of the Italians, you were disregarded. Now, some would argue that it was a prejudicial, institutionalized prejudice. Some would argue that Black Americans matter less in the worldview than many others. And I can't, or at this point won't, debate any of the social issues. But I can tell you there is a disparity of care, and it's not by accident. 73% of all the people that died during the early part of 2020 in the state of Louisiana from COVID-19 were Black Americans. And if you look nationwide, you see very similar indications in any other highly populated Black area, let's say Detroit, Michigan, Chicago, Illinois. So it was a very courageous white intensivist, who is a person who works in intensive care in a New York hospital on YouTube, who came out and said, this is not a respiratory disease. We are approaching this incorrectly. And I think he had a 3-minute blurb, and they may have taken him off the air. And the second thing I saw by the spring of 2020 was a Black female. It was a nurse. And she was saying in a very mournful voice, when Black people come into the intensive care and we put them on a ventilator, they die within hours. And that was her proof that this was not a respiratory disease. And as quiet and as I say sneaky, the medical establishment and the political arena slowly withdrew the call out for ventilators and withdrew the major statement that it was a respiratory disease. So that's the historical point of view. How was COVID-19 handled in the United States? Poorly.
Given all of what you just said, and you said a lot, is there any real discussion going on within the medical community in the United States and or abroad concerning what has been the methodology for confronting this disease? I mean, has there been any real discussion and debate around?
Yes, the voices of the knowledgeable. When I say that, that's your Nobel Prize winner. It was a biology Nobel Prize winner who was very, very articulate in the beginning and was hushed by being taken off various media. However, to answer your question more temporally, there in the UK is a Dr. John Campbell, and I follow John on YouTube. And he is the only person that I have seen consistently cry out that one, the inoculation method for giving COVID-19 may have contributed to the deaths of people because as he indicated, and there's YouTube, I don't know the title, but his name is Dr. John Campbell. He is in the UK. He went through and got data and took photographs of various nursing. I think his PhD may have originally been in nursing, and now he's in healthcare specific, and he's an academic person. He shows the method in which they were giving this inoculum. And it appears that a number of nurses or CMAs or certified medical assistants or military persons were improperly taught. And I say improperly and stand behind it because I've taught how to give an intramuscular injection. And he does an excellent job showing how many were jabbed, as they would say, get the jab. The personnel was pushing it in the deltoid muscle without pulling back on the syringe chamber to see if they had entered a vein. If you're injecting this inoculum directly in a vein, you are not putting it in the deltoid muscle. It is not sequestered. It is now free to move through the blood system. And that was one of the allegations for people who had blood clot formation, who had endocarditis, pericarditis, that it is possible that an improper injection was done and this novel or experimental injection of a genetic material went directly into the bloodstream. So to answer your question, yes, there are those not only discussing it, but actually taking it apart piece by piece. And anyone who wants to hear another opinion other than mine, please tune in to UK and look at Dr. John Campbell. On another front, the FLCCC is something like Foreign League. I don't know the whole title. I do know that that's their acronym. They have Zoom meetings, and I have been proud to be part of several. And in these Zoom meetings, a number of them are researchers. I'm talking PhD scientists out of some very austere research sites. And initially they were outraged when I talked and listened to them in 2020 and 2021. They were outraged that they were not consulted, that opinions given out was not adjudicated. They argued that FDA or the Food Drug Administration did not have the authority to tell any company you can circumvent experimentations. Because in the routine or the normal world, before you can administer to humans, you go through clinical trials. And the FDA, many people thought it meant they were saying it was safe. No. FDA approval simply told Pfizer, Moderna, and others, you don't have to go through the trials. Now, I ask you, if I exempt you from something, doesn't mean you passed. It simply means that you don't have to go through the protocol. And that kind of misinformation or misunderstanding among many felt that this was safe. It was something recommended. FDA said it's okay. No. FDA didn't say it's okay. They simply say you do not have to go through the 3-year, 5-year, or 10-year clinical trials to prove that this is a safe inoculum. And the bad news is, as time has passed and they now have to admit the inoculum did not protect you from infection. This inoculum boosters do not protect you from infection. They are withdrawing it, and they're saying very little about we made a mistake, this isn't true. And I have patients now, or ex-patients or former patients, calling to say, Dr. Bowles, how do we get this out of us? How do we get rid of it? I got the shot, and then I got 2 boosters, and now they're telling me still wear a mask and still wash your hands, and that I'm still able to get infected. How do I get this genetic stuff out of me? And that's a hard question because I don't know. And guess what? No one else does either. It hasn't been done before. And part of the data, to answer your question to another degree, it has shown that mothers are secreting in breast milk the messenger RNA. I didn't say the protein, spike protein. I'm saying that the message itself is in the milk. What does that say? The biggest conspirator theorist is correct. The message injected in the deltoid has been translated or transcribed back to the DNA in the nucleus. You know what else we call that? Genetic engineering. What does that mean 10 years from now? I don't know. Yeah. What does it mean if a mother's milk has the messenger RNA and we're allowing a child, a newborn with no blood-brain barrier, to consume it? I don't know. And when you have that many I don't knows, that means it was experimental. And they're saying we have insufficient data. And what is the data? It's us, or those who took the injection. So we are, in effect, waiting to get more data. Also, Dr. Campbell talks about I think they're called the VAERS, VAERS, where CDC said, oh, if you're having an adverse reaction, please submit information. I'm here to tell you that was a sham. You had to get a 17 or something like a 12 or 17 digit code, which you had to enter every time if you intended to talk about if you had a headache, if you had chills, if you were nauseous. And consequently, you couldn't use a familiar thing like your social security number or something else that you could readily recall. And if you transposed a number, left out a number, you couldn't access your file. So I think that was intentional so that they would get reduced reporting because reporting was so difficult. So that's Dr. Valvo Bowles speaking, and I stand behind what I'm saying. I think it was a grand experiment. It was economically driven, meaning money, and the persons that had the strongest voice were the least qualified to talk about public health and support. One other point, and this is something I made back at 2020, America has the resources to have protected schools and churches. We know that there are filtration systems capable of removing the virus from the air. You heard me. They do it in hospitals. They do it in space travel types of laboratories. I've worked in enough laboratories. I am CLIA certified, which is a certified laboratory inspector agent. I know we have very small micron filters. We have graphite carbon filters that can remove the virus. So shutting a school was not the only alternative. And in private schools and wealthy environments, they installed these filtration systems and it was business as usual. So those who suffered 2.5 years, young people missed their peer interactions. We had a actuary or data that I access. I started to say I should keep it on me, that the school's children in public school have regressed by 2 years. And that's academically. Mathematics has gone backwards. Reading ability has gone backwards. I can tell you the social dynamics have also regressed. Young people only had social media. So that means a 13-year-old was asking questions of another 13-year-old. So there was very little well-informed information exchanged. And I'm going to tell you from an adolescent medicine point of view, when something is repeated often enough, it becomes fact, even if it's preposterous. So when you're dealing with teenagers, one of the things I would do is I always listen for the first few sessions to hear what are the facts according to a 13-year-old or an 11-year-old. And too often parents go in trying to fix things without even knowing the extent to which it is broken or how rooted it is. So I can tell you that this 2.5-year isolation with only social media and young people to young people conversations, they did not get a broad opinion. They weren't in the malls. They didn't go to their schools. They couldn't go to church of worship. Think about what that means when you are 12. So
okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
a lot of things were done.
Dr. Bowles, our focus for the past, 27 minutes, my time is flying, has been on the United States. What about the global South? What has the impact been, and where are we now, as far as you know, in South Africa and other countries within the global South?
This is a very interesting question, and it's kind of, in my opinion, serendipitous. From the avaricious behavior of Americans and some others, the countries on the continent of Africa did not receive quickly the inoculums distributed from these, quote, industrialized country. And guess what? It's to your advantage. Now that you have not received messenger RNA injections from the Pfizers and Modernas and so forth, you will become the control. You are the people who went through the pandemic using what I call the wisdom of the elders, the teas that you know, and the different kind of medications that are practiced. Ivermectin, I know, is widely used on the continent, and it has been successful. When in my earlier days, I studied dengue fever. And when I traveled to Africa, 40 years ago, I remember the kinds of scourges that are possible there and are being met head on. The shamans, in my opinion, are just brilliant. I would love to be able to take a Sambatica and really work with some of the elders and understand what roots, what leaves, what bark, what type of sediment, because I know there's certain kinds of dirts that have minerals and other nutrients. And I respect that highly. So to answer your question, when there was perhaps an effort to leave the rest of the world out, it could be a blessing, because those of you who did not receive this new experimental medication are not plagued with the concept of how do I get this out of me, or what will this do to my children. And those of you who have survived this, you are stronger now. Your body immune system has recognized and defeated. So when they talk about recurrence, resurgence, and all of these mutations, your body adaptation is higher. Again, I referenced Dr. John Campbell, who has looked at people who were inoculated versus natural immunity, and the natural immunity is stronger. more broad, more lasting. And his latest statistics that I remember seeing is that when they looked at who is dying now from the COVID, it's the immunized. And that's because the immunity was very narrow, that when you use genetics to tell the body how to respond, instead of letting the mother nature teach it how to respond, you are in effect narrowing what the body reacts to. And they're finding that wasn't very wise, because the COVID-19 mutates faster than they can generate these inoculums against it. You can't beat Mother Nature. So my comment to your answer is those who felt left out, those who were not included in this major surge pandemic, kudos to you. Excellent. In the next 5 to 10 years, you will become the celebrity. I predict that the scientists, the real scientists, and I would love to be among them, will be coming onto the continent of Africa and wanting to take blood tests and wanting to know how, what has your body done and how has it adapted? Because the experiment that was widely performed in America, we still have to answer a lot of questions, and we always need what we call a control. And that means a clean thing, someone who wasn't infected or who wasn't inoculated. So to answer your question, I think there is an advantage now in hindsight and foresight to those who did not succumb to the infection itself, but did suffer through the infection and are now recovered and did it without inoculum.
I have for now, because we're going to have you back. I mean, it's been many months since you were last on the platform with me. From what you've laid out in the past, half hour that we've been together, it has raised a number of other questions for me vis-a-vis the controversy still surrounding this. Not just the pandemic, but more importantly, the recommended prescription for the pandemic that, as you pointed out, has enriched a whole lot of folk. Well, not a whole lot of folk, a few folk, and companies have been greatly enriched. My final question to you, and this is way off, probably into left field because it involves a sports figure, but I'm sure that you are aware of at least some of the controversies that have been surrounding Kyrie Irving. And those controversies began with him refusing to take the jab and really becoming a person of special focus of ire from the establishment because he refused to take the jab. You have any thoughts about?
Well, if you look at it, there were a couple of celebrities, and certainly, let me first address the ire you mentioned. There has been, without a doubt, very focused negative energy put forth on anyone, and they labeled us at one time. They had me labeled as anti-vaccine.
Right.
And it was a very heinous label, and that should never be. I would open many of my talks talking about I am not anti-vaccine and then go through the data. And when it becomes a high-profile figure and they take a position, it hurts those who are pushing for the money. Think of it as economic.
Right.
So anything, if I buy candy bar and it's not good, and I tell everybody this candy bar is not good, they'll come after me because the whole idea is public opinion weighs very heavily. The sad thing that I keep saying, and I am referencing the high profile athletes, there are many people who see what they say as must be true. They got the money to check it. They have the right to say it. So those are the groups that not just pharmaceutical companies, but you only get federal agents. You'll get a lot of what you wouldn't expect organized government to even care, but they do. And you can lose contracts You can be threatened with little picky things, like maybe where you park your car, suddenly it's not allowed to be parked, or things such as that, where you get into a feud, as you might want to call it, and it has nothing to do with the reality of the situation, but it's punishment. We call it backlash. And well, I'm not a real advocate for all that Kanye West says. He now knows his yay. I don't know if you've been following that. Yes. That Adidas grabbed his contract for his shoes. And my question is, I'm a little confused. If you're manufacturing shoes, how does a comment about a group have anything to do with shoes? So it is a punishing act. It's a act of, you better be obedient to what I want you to say. I want your profile. Look at, well, you may not be aware, but in America, I'll go back 15 years. Shaquille O'Neal and Venus, the tennis player, Williams, and Serena, her sister, were very big with the dairy industry. And they had these commercials with this white mustache, and they'd say, "Got milk." Well, the dairy industry got sued because it is clear many people of color cannot digest a protein in bovine milk. Now, notice I said bovine. See, in America, we call milk, it all comes from a cow. Whereas in Europe and other places, we have goat milk, and there's the mare's milk, there's camel milk, and there's buffalo milk. There's different milks. Well, in the bovine of the American Dairy Association, there's a sugar, there's a protein that is not well digested in the adult Black people and Mediterranean people. We simply don't have that enzyme in a high percentage as we age. So if we drink the milk, as dairy would call it, you get severe gas and a querulous stomach. Some people even get diarrhea. So when it was challenged, they had to pull those commercials, and they're no longer played. They do not allow high-profile Black athletes to come on and suggest that we drink milk, we being people of color. So sometimes public opinion can make a big difference. And that's the best example. Well, the other would be smoking, where there was an outcry of people that eventually got cigarette commercials off of the American TV. So that's my comment. Any high profile person who speaks out against what is the standard endorsed propaganda can be punished, and I won't say can, will be punished.
Will be punished. Okay, Dr. Bowles, I thank you. And I'm sure that the audience, the viewing and listening audience, thanks you for taking the time to come on the platform and share with us your knowledge. We are going to have you back much sooner rather than later, so that we can continue this conversation. It's a very important one. Thank you. May Almighty God bless the rest of your day, and keep on fighting, my sister.
Well, I feel blessed to have met you, and I certainly am appreciative to being invited to your forum. So I look forward to the invitation and our next time together.
Great. Thank you. Next up is our brother Amir Abdul Malik Ali. We're going to talk about the passing of a prominent, often controversial figure, well known in large swaths of the African American and larger Muslim community, Imam ABDUL MUSA. So just stay with us, inshallah.
When we came here, we had certain goals. And we said if we last 5 years when we get here, we're going to break all the records. This is way up in the 30-something year. And we've experienced everything that Washington, D.C. can throw at a person or a group. We're still here. We're still alive. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. The other thing is, something happened recently. We always talked about archives. We always talk about chronicling. So we have, I don't know if you see here, we have notebooks of historical realities. And so the other week they stole all my ID and everything, but they also stole the notebooks. That's why I know as a government, if it was a Negro, He might steal money, he might steal other things, but he don't have no need for the 1990-something record book or 2000 so-and-so record book. So what they doing, I'm not saying that the government instructed some people to whack me upside the head over and over again. One of the brothers here, you know what he said? He has some medical training. And they looked at the video, they looked at me, they said, were you conscious doing all of that? You never passed out? I said, absolutely not. I didn't pass out at all. He said, that is serious. He has medical training. Now, I'm going to jump to the crux of the khutbah today. All of my historical writings related to what happened in the past and to chronicle and pass that message on to the rest of humanity. And I was hooked up in that. I liked it. The government stole all that. Along with the property out there in California, they just took it. The bank records, everything they have that I can order them through the courts, but they stole all of that. Now, here's what I say. All that was in the past. A few nights ago, or a few days ago, I woke up with a flash. It was a flash. Let them have the flash. The past. Claim the future. As a movement, as an organization, as a contribution you want to make to history, what do you want that to look like, right? What do you want to be like? So what that means is, what do you want your organization to look like as becoming a world-class organization? So that means let them have the past. We're claiming the future, right? And we're coming up with our own plans for the future. So starting right here today and a few days past, we let the past go. Whatever you got, keep it. You want all that out there in Oakland, you keep it. That's all in the past. So now we're moving toward the future. When it says write your own book, you know, want to get his book this hand, the other hand. So really writing our own.
Alhamdulillah. The clip that you just saw came from the last, if the information that I have is accurate, the last khutbah or Friday sermon that Imam ABDUL MUSA delivered before his passing. He passed away a month later, and I found that presentation, that sermon that he delivered, that last sermon that he delivered, very reflective. I mean, there was a vulnerability that came through that I had never seen before. There was also a deep reflection. There was a combination of vulnerability and deep reflection on the part of Imam Musa. It's like he sensed that his time on this side of the earth was rapidly coming to a close, and it's very, very interesting and profound message that he delivered on that day. He shared some things about his vulnerabilities, his physical vulnerabilities, and how he was how some of his capacity was becoming more diminished. He had this very kind of unique way of saying serious things in in almost like a satirical or comedic style. He can make you laugh with a serious note that he would convey. Anyway, I say all that to say I wasn't able to make his janaza, and I really wanted to. I felt that it was my duty to be present, to show my respect for the the struggle, the years of struggle that he had, that he was known for. And and this despite the fact that there were times when he and I had strong differences. We had strong differences, but I always respected Imam ABDUL MUSA from the feeling that, even when I thought he was wrong about something, it was coming from a place of sincerity. So anyway, I say all that to say, we wanted to just devote a little bit of time on today's broadcast with a brother who is also very, very close to Imam ABDUL MUSA, Amir Abdul Malik Ali. Without any further ado, let's bring him on, and I'd like for you, my brother, to share your thoughts, your remembrances with the time we have left in the broadcast of the brother that you knew as a leader, as a brother in Islam, as a friend. Why don't you begin by how you first met Imam ABDUL MUSA?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I met Imam ABDUL MUSA when I was on the campus, San Francisco State University. Some of the Iranian brothers, we were tight with some of the Iranian brothers because we were campus activists and they were activists as well. So we had a mutual respect for each other. And so when they found out that I was interested in Islam, Imam Musa had been coming to the campus without me knowing. And so when they found out that I was interested in Islam, they took me to Oakland. And that's where I took my Shahada. Imam Musa was supposed to be there, but they put him back in prison on a fake parole violation. So I took my Shahada. And then some months later, I would go every Sunday. My wife and I would go every Sunday to listen to him talk in Oakland. So it was the early 80s is when I met Imam ABDUL MUSA, and he was a genius. He was a genius. There were those of us after we left the campus, we wanted a teacher, and we wanted to follow a leader, and we were using Malcolm as a criteria. We wanted someone who was educated, but we didn't want someone who was college educated. And so, as I said, Malcolm was the framework that we were using. And so, by the grace of Allah, some of us ended up over in East Oakland, and we studied under him. Let me say real quick, Brother Saalakhan, the significance in the short time that we have of Imam Musa. If you go back to the Los Angeles Times in August 1980, you'll see an article. I'm not sure which day, but it was August 1980. And the article said, urban Black youth becoming more militant. That's what the article said. Now let's put in some historical context here. Who are these Black youth? These Black youth were in their late teens and early 20s. These Black youth were children during the 60s. 9, 10, 11 years old, 12 years old, 13 years old. And in the early 80s, they were in their late teens and early 20s, having been influenced by the Panthers, Muhammad Ali, the struggle, the movement. Now, in the early 80s, this generation of Black youth were coming into Islam. And they were coming into Islam with, having been trained by those in the 60s. So there was a beautiful militancy, as Dr. King would call it. And there was a deep love for Malcolm, all right, beyond the T-shirts and all that. I mean, a deep love for Malcolm and a deep desire to help our people in terms of the liberation movement. So when this generation came into Islam, there was a vacuum. You had Minister Farrakhan who was spitting fire, but it wasn't Quran and Sunnah. You had Imam Waruddin Rahmatullah who was following Quran and Sunnah, but he wasn't spitting fire. So who were the Muslims who were following Quran and Sunnah who were spitting fire? Three Islamic movements that could help this generation make its transition from Black nationalism to Islam and so on and so forth. Three Islamic movements were extremely significant, but they came under attack. Those three Islamic movements were the Dar al-Islam, the Islamic Party, and the Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood. Those three movements could help this new generation with this love for Malcolm and the love for activism and so on and so forth make the transition. But those three organizations were under attack. So now there was a vacuum, especially for this new generation coming into Islam out of Black nationalism, out of whatever type of activism. So there's a vacuum. Enter Imam Musa, because Imam Musa was the one who helped this generation, these children of the 60s generation, now make their transition from what they were coming out of to and into Islam, and teaching how to use Islam as an instrument for our liberation. So he was taking this generation places that Malcolm hadn't gotten to yet, that Malcolm was headed there, but Malcolm hadn't gotten to yet. Introducing this generation to Hassan al-Banna, introducing this generation to Sayyid Qutb, introducing this generation to Uthman Danfodio, introducing this generation to Maududi. This was extremely significant. Introducing this generation to some of the people and the groups that Malcolm had gotten with when he went internationally. That wasn't around, brother. That wasn't around. You know what I'm saying? And so taking this generation and training this generation in a tradition that was not known about by this particular generation. It wasn't known. The Dar wasn't known. The Islamic Party wasn't known. The Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood wasn't known, at least on this side. And so Imam Musa, he gave us a training that was rooted in those traditions. And so when he announced that we were starting the Asabakun movement, much of the information that we were using in our training and our development and so on and so forth was from the Dar. Because Imam Musa was trained in prison. When he came to Quran and Sunnah, he went through the whole stage of Clarence Reams, Big Hank, Clarence X, Abdul Ali Musa, like that Malcolm type of trajectory. So when he's in prison, he becomes Clarence X. And then when a changeover occurs to Quran and Sunnah, now he's following the Quran and Sunnah, but he's trained and taught by brothers from the Dar. It was brothers from the Dar who gave him the name Musa. All right. And so he's coming with this whole plan, this whole program, and we were following the program. We were following the program to the best of our ability, right? Quran and Sunnah, the emphasis that he put on moral character. This is something that's not, Islam is vast. So where do we start? He started with moral character, that we have to really focus on developing our moral character. And the first place we have to exhibit that moral character is with our families. And then from there, the community. So it doesn't mean we're not going to make mistakes. Of course, we're going to make mistakes. But if the focus is on moral character, then if we did make a mistake, then we would jump right back on the Sirat al-Mustaqim, right? That we would jump right back on it, because everyone knows it's all about moral character. It doesn't matter how super Sunni you're dressed, how pretty your Arabic is it comes down to moral character. And that was extremely, extremely important to put that emphasis there. And so when he left, Brother Saalakhan, when he left Oakland to start a masjid in DC, the average age of the people who were running the masjid in Oakland was 26. That was the average age, like totally running the masjid. You know what I'm saying? In the deepest part of the hood, the deep east, we call it. And so it was 26. And the reason why it was 26, it was that high, because one of our brothers had just turned 40. That's why it went up to 26. So this was a masjid that was run primarily by 20 and 30 somethings. You know what I'm saying? And you can go all throughout the country today and show me a masjid that is totally and completely run by 20 and 30 year olds. You'd be hard pressed to find it. And so he had faith, in that type of faith in the youth, and giving them those types of responsibilities. So Imam Musa was a genius, and he was also historical. He was also an historical figure. Sometimes we may think historical figures have to be known all around and so on and so forth, but he was a genius and he was an historical figure.
You know, I'm well aware of the fact that Imam Musa, like Imam Asi, you know, they're well known in South Africa, and this program, of course, is coming from out of South Africa. Question: Did you ever accompany him on any of his visits to South Africa?
No,
Okay.
I never did. But I knew that he had love there, because when things were building up in South Africa in terms of the activism of the Muslims, I was at the masjid one day and the phone rang, and I answered the phone, and the brothers told me, "Is Imam Musa there?" You know, asked me if Imam Musa's there, and they were brothers from South Africa. And they had asked to talk to him. So yeah, so he had just a lot of respect, you know, a lot of respect, not just in this country, but around the world.
Okay, so you became connected to Imam Musa in the 80s.
Yes, early 80s.
What was that relationship like?
I was a student, and I remember coming home and telling my wife, "I'm gonna do whatever he says." I said, "I'm gonna do whatever he says." And so I wanted to take everything in, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm making this transition. And I'll tell you, Saalakhan, Brother Saalakhan, I made a dua to Allah. I did. And I said to Allah, you know, if I was older during the times that Malcolm was alive, I would have gone and joined him and gotten with him. If you show me a Malcolm of today, I'll get with him. And then, alhamdulillah, Allah took me to East Oakland. And when I checked him out, he never said it, but I said it. I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "You were Clarence Reams, you were Big Hank, you were Clarence X, and then you were Abdul Ali Musa?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, cool. You know what I'm saying? Because for me, again, Malcolm was the model. And so, and I learned from him. And he's a genius. No, he's a genius. And I tried to take in as much as I could. And so that was my intention, to take in as much as I could, because this right here is a historical figure. And so, and I felt that I was blessed by Allah to be there and to be with him.
Now there was, you know, and we're nearing, you know, coming to close to the end of today's broadcast, but, you know, there was an unfortunate split and fitna that erupted between Imam Musa and some of his brethren on the West Coast. What can you share about that and how that played out, and what you believe the implications are for the future now that he's gone?
It was a COINTELPRO. You have to understand that the Muslims, the Ashabakun movement in Oakland was like a Muslim Black Panthers, if you will. We wasn't walking down the street with guns or anything like that, but it was like an Islamic Black Panthers, because this is Black Panther territory, Oakland. So when they saw these brothers in black, but it wasn't berets, it was black kufis, you know what I'm saying? Then that was like you know, the transition. You know what I'm saying? We had the most diverse Jumas in Oakland, African American, right? And Arab, Indo-Pakistani, so on and so forth. All the generations were represented, and that type of thing. And the people were responding to the message that Imam Musa was given, right? And he would always say, "Give the people something they could use. No fluffy stuff. Give the people something they could use." And so it was only a matter of time. And I was sitting down one day, just channel surfing, and I went past Fox News, and there I was. They had me giving a talk on the campus, one of the campuses, and under it said "Radical Islam in America." And so when I saw that, I said, "Okay, we're going to get hit," because he taught us that. First it gets on television, and then brace yourself, because now there's going to some type of hit is going to come. So when I saw that, I said, "Okay, we're going to get hit," right? And so we did. We got hit, but we didn't anticipate how it would come, because we've gotten hit before. But it was a situation where Imam Musa got really, really paranoid. You know what I'm saying? And began to question everybody around him, even those who were close to him from the early days. You know, and so when we had discussions about it, for some of us it was clear this is a COINTELPRO. You know what I'm saying? And this is something that was coming. You know what I'm saying? That type of thing. He didn't think it. He didn't think it was. And so as a result of that, that created a split, right? But even though it did create a split and so on and so forth, it doesn't negate his significance. Right. It doesn't negate who he was. It doesn't negate how important his contribution was, and his contribution is, right? His contribution is going to go beyond just his life. You know what I'm saying? Because he set some things in motion, right? And so, yeah, it was. But towards the end of his life, like as you noticed, as you noted earlier, he was sounding differently. You know what I'm saying? He was sounding different, and so on and so forth. And that's alhamdulillah. But you know, Allah's in charge. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, it doesn't negate his significance. This was a historical figure who came at a time that was so needed because of the vacuum that I was talking about earlier. In the early 80s, Saalakhan, I know we're pressed for time, but I'll just say this and land. In the early 80s, there was a whole bunch of Muslim leaders spitting fire. By the late 80s, almost all of them were gone. Almost all of them had been pacified. The only ones left, Imam Musa, Imam El-Hajj, right? A couple others here in America.
ABDUL.
Yes, without and he was significant too. Imam Musa introduced us to him. Mm-hmm. And when we saw Revolution by the Book, and we read Revolution by the Book, and Imam Musa had us studying that book right there is so critical, because Imam Jamil did something again that Malcolm hadn't gotten to. Imam Jamil was specifically showing us how to use Islam as an instrument for our liberation. I mean, it was specific. That book, Revolution by the Book, is specific as to how to do that. That's why he's in prison right now, because the government felt that he was the next one. And so Imam Musa introduced us to these people. He introduced us to this tradition. And as a result, he kept the tradition alive. Even though, again, the Islamic Party was vamped on, the DAR was vamped on, Mosque Islamic Brotherhood was vamped on, still here, the MIB still here. But Imam Musa kept that tradition alive. And that was so critical to keep it alive, brother. And so, I just, so the love that many of us have for Imam Musa is still here and still strong, irrespective of what went down.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, my brother, we're going to end it here. I regret having to end it here, but inshallah ta'ala, we're going to pick this conversation up again with a panel that will include you. Inshallah. It has to include you, inshallah ta'ala. So thank you for taking the time to join us.
Thank you. And we're also, Brother Saalakhan, having a tribute to him next Saturday, December 10th. Out here in Oakland, and it'll be streamed. It'll be Facebook streamed.
Good. Alhamdulillah. All right. Thank you, brother. May Allah Ta'ala bless the rest of your day. Okay, brothers and sisters, friends of Salam Media, Brother Saalakhan, the Afia Foundation, folks who struggle both here and abroad, we want to thank you for joining us today. No doubt you will benefit from the visitation of Dr. Velva Bowles and our dear brother Amir Abdul Malik Ali. Inshallah ta'ala, this struggle on the information level and on the in the trenches level will continue. It must continue, but until then, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time, through the ages, surely humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.